Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are talking metabolism, midlife, weight gain, and why so many women feel exhausted, inflamed, and stuck, no matter how healthy they try to be. I'm joined by Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, who is a conventionally trained doctor and former ER physician who shifted out of burnout and into root cause proactive care. We unpack insulin resistance. I really love this part. I didn't realize actually how important of a piece this is until talking with Dr. Gajer. And we talk muscle loss, sleep. Of course, we always talk sleep, but this is a different conversation. Hormones and why the old eat less, move more advice can backfire in midlife. If you are dealing with fatigue, stubborn weight gain, poor sleep, perimenopausal changes, things like this episode will help you understand what's actually going on and where to start. I really loved this one and the way the doctor was able to break down what we need to start implementing, what we need to do to see a change. I hope you all love it as much as I do, and I would love to hear your thoughts. You can leave a review to share, or you can send me a DM. You can also send this to a friend who could use this amazing information. So thank you guys so much for being here, and here is the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. I have Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, and I am so excited to talk to you today. So welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Okay. So before we get started on our topic, which I know I told you before we hit record, everybody wants to talk about, can you please just tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Dr. Aleksandra Gajer. I am a conventionally trained MD. So I went to medical school at University of Maryland here on the East Coast. I trained in emergency medicine, and then I spent 10 years working in the emergency department, dealing with some of the sickest patients that come in the hospital for all kinds of varying complaints. And, that led to a lot of burnout in myself and some disillusionment with the state of medicine and health. And I started to feel like the ER was a bit of a revolving door where people with chronic illnesses were coming back over and over again. And each time they were a little worse. And maybe we could patch them up and get them through until the next visit. But often I would meet the same people with worsening diabetes, worsening heart disease, worsening kidney disease. And eventually there were times when they would pass away in our ER. And I felt like if I got to work with these people maybe 20, 30 years earlier, and we started to really work on some of the roots of health and try to help people change habits and live life in a way that they could build real health, then maybe we could stop this cycle. And that kind of led me to start my practice where I focus a lot about metabolic health, but also just focusing on, rather than just chasing disease, which a lot of medicine is focused on now, being a little proactive about building a state of health that's going to take you through all the decades of your life.
Yeah. Oh, good. I love that. I think that I want to talk about metabolism because I know everybody wants to talk about that. But before we get into that, you mentioned the root of the matter of why people are coming in so often. And and you talked about habits too. And this is a two-part question, but what do you think was missing from a lot of the patients that you saw? And the second part of that is, do you think that your patients that you saw were just unaware of different things, or was it they knew, but it was just too hard to implement?
Yeah, I think both, and it's such a good question. So what was missing, I think modern medicine is incredible. We're able to do so many things. We're able to get people through cancer diagnoses, and people survive heart attacks now. But it is set up in a way that in your visit with your doctor, if you have a new health problem, you have about 10 minutes to discuss it. And the only thing you can do in 10 minutes is prescribe a medication. So if somebody is coming in at 40 years old, 45, and they get a new diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, they're told, take this medication, also try to eat better and move more, but mostly just take this medication. And I don't think we give people enough support to say, no, this is a wake up call. This is a 4 alarm fire. We need to change everything in your life. And you do not have to be stuck on this medication forever. Maybe we need to do this for the short term to get you out of this 4 alarm fire state. But what I want to do is let's start rebuilding your body so that you do not have diabetes anymore and you don't end up developing atherosclerosis that leads to a stroke or a heart attack down the road. And I think most doctors, they would love to do that. But unfortunately, in an insurance based model, we don't have time. You have to see 40 people in a day. You have 10 minutes. And the amount of most people need a lot of support to make real change, And I think that there's a common misconception that it is too hard and that maybe it's not going to be worth it. This is just genetic. Everybody in my family was like this, and this is just how I am. So I think it's somewhat of a double-edged sword in that way.
So when you talk to somebody and they're like, this is genetic, this is like runs in my family, what's your answer to that?
Yeah. So, habits run in families as well. And
Yeah.
there is of course we all have a set of genetics that we have to work with, but now we do have a lot of tools to help people change habits as well. So, I think that changing habits is really hard, but it is doable, especially with the right level of support. So, usually when I work with people, especially if something's going on, like you have a new diagnosis of diabetes, we meet every week and we start working on building a way of eating and moving that fits your life, that starts nourishing your body and starts helping you heal. And yeah, I think that's just not a one-time conversation. You can tell someone what to do, but people have busy lives. People have competing priorities. People have children and aging parents and jobs that are extremely demanding. They can't spend all their time on this. But if they have an ally, I think that it becomes easier. And I think, yeah, people need to know that those changes are possible and they don't necessarily have to be extremely hard and completely different from what you've done your whole life. Sometimes small changes go a long way.
Yeah, it's really amazing that you're able to meet with them so often and help them because I think if you're coming in, I think, and a lot of people aren't used to that because we are used to going to the doctor and then like we get that 10 minutes. And we've talked about this on the podcast a lot. I actually just had a doctor appointment this week where it was, a pretty typical doctor, a specialist, and he sat with me for 30 minutes and like explained everything and drew me a picture. And I was like, I was expecting the other type of treatment. And it's just like, it's not the norm anymore to have that. I'm sorry that this is happening and some empathy. And like, because he had
Right.
given me a little bit more time, it's like, I feel like we're not used to that and we don't expect it. And when you are able to get that, like how far that goes, I feel like,
Hmm.
especially when you're dealing with something, you say these habits are hard, it's hard to implement, but like also, so is having diabetes.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that when you're talking about working with these patients of yours, what is some of the main issues that people come to you with? Are they like, hey, I cannot figure this out with my primary doctor. I need more support with X, Y, or Z. And what are those disease illnesses that they're coming to you with?
Yeah. So I think there's a variety of things. There's a lot of entry points through just, I would like to lose weight and be healthier.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great reason to come in, and usually we can start working on that. And once the weight starts to move, and there's usually, it's not just weight, it's never just weight, it's weight and I feel tired and I can't get down on the floor and play with my kids, or I movement isn't bringing me, like, I used to be so active in college and now it just doesn't feel that good to move, and I'm not sleeping well, and I don't have the drive. The things that used to be really joyful are not anymore. So it's usually, sometimes it's weight, but weight is the tip of the iceberg. And we get the weight moving, and a lot of times those other things do improve, but sometimes we need to look deeper and see what's going on, if there's some hormonal imbalances, if maybe there's an issue with the gut microbiome that controls so much of what else is going on in our bodies. And yeah, my role is really to try to give people the support to live in their most vital bodies, to first of all prevent chronic illness, um, and have a long health span. We talk about lifespan, which is how long you'll live, but your health span is how long you'll live and be healthy and do all the things that you want to do, which I think is more interesting to people. No one wants to live forever and be confined to the couch.
Yeah.
So the goals are really, first, like, how do we prevent the things that are slowly eroding your health span? And then it's really, how do we bring back your vitality and hold on to it so that you can live in a body that can carry you through whatever it is you want to do in this life.
Yeah. I have a lot of women that I speak to in midlife that one of the biggest complaints is fatigue, like you had mentioned, and that chronic fatigue. And it's like, what the heck is it? Is it because I'm so busy? But they know it's not because of that. Like, there's more to
Mm-hmm.
it. Is that a real common symptom that the women that you deal with are experiencing?
Yes, yes. And actually, I love, I think that, like, in conventional medicine, we often dislike that complaint because it's like, but it's actually one of my favorites, because I think that there's so much to unpack there. I think that there's a number of causes, and it is different for different women, but um, the number one symptom of inflammation in the body is fatigue. So inflamed bodies are often fatigued, and inflammation can come from all sort of sources, definitely the gut, but also inadequate hormone support, burnout, issues with cortisol production. Sometimes there's thyroid issues that are hard to pinpoint. Um, and sometimes it is just, maybe burnout, I think, is really interesting. Maybe we've been so busy for so long, especially as women, caring for somebody else, caring for children, providing, that our body sort of enters a state of burnout where we can't make the right amount of hormones to kind of keep us motivated and driven. And sometimes giving women the support, either through hormones or supplements, they feel like that comes back and they're able to do more of the things that kind of both support their bodies and make them happy.
I think that's when you say, like, make them happy, that's so important when you're feeling so tired and fatigued. I've personally dealt with this in a big way. It is so depressing to deal
Yeah,
with that. Like, it's like you can't,
absolutely.
it's like getting off the couch to make dinner seems like you're asking me to run a marathon. It
Right.
seems impossible.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's often misinterpreted as depression. And,
Mhm.
we unfortunately overprescribe Zoloft and Lexapro, all those things, because, yeah, that burnout or that fatigue, which may be inflammation, it may also be an issue with mitochondrial health. So mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, which make something called ATP, which is the unit of energy that we need to feel energized, and that often slows down, especially in midlife, or after periods of intense stress or child rearing or career stress. And um, And it's just night and day when we support women the right way. And they're like, I was never depressed. I was just really tired.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, I definitely can see how that would be like, oh, you must be depressed. And especially because if
Right.
you can't get off the couch, right? That's like a
Yeah.
symptom of being depressed.
Yeah.
But literally, you're just like, and we push ourselves. It's like we have to show up, and that maybe we rely on something like caffeine or whatever to get through, because you're like, I can't, like, I need to do this, but physically it feels really hard. And I'm wondering, how does weight gain come into play? You were talking about sometimes I'm sure women come to you and they're like, okay, I'm not doing anything different, but my weight has changed in midlife.
Yeah.
What do you see that as a very common thing? And I mean, I'm sure there's so many reasons why that occurs, but maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yes, that's such a common issue, where women who've been very active, who've sort of maintained a really healthy weight, suddenly feel like they're doing all the same things, that the weight is just not coming off. And there are a number of reasons. Hormone shifts are a big one.
Yeah.
When as we enter our 40s, 50s, there's this long period of perimenopause for most women, and we're just kind of starting to talk about this, and now there are a lot of women talking about it, but menopause used to be something that's kind of swept under the rug. It's one day where you don't have any more periods. Maybe you have a hot flash and go on with your life. But now we know that perimenopause might be 10, maybe even 12 years before that magic day where you're no longer having a period. And during that time period, there's a real roller coaster of what's going on with your hormones as you transition from your fertile years to your non-childbearing years. And there's the sex hormones, which most people are familiar with, like estrogen, progesterone, even testosterone. But there's a lot of other hormones at play here, like insulin, which really governs how you store fat.
Mm.
Um, we often, during this transition, women become more insulin resistant. And that is kind of a key factor in metabolic health. So, just to kind of try to break this down a little bit, I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. But um, insulin is the main hormone that determines what will happen to food after you put it in your body. Are we going to turn it into fuel and energy, or are we going to store it as fat? And insulin has to open the door on the cells to let sugar in. And most foods are broken down to blood sugar. So we're relying on insulin to open that door. And for many people, especially during hormonal transitions, our body becomes more insulin resistant, which means that insulin's knocking at that door and the door is not opening. They're saying,
Mm-hmm.
"We're not home. We're not going to answer." So, and then insulin gives the signal to store fat. So insulin is a fat storage hormone, and if it can't get that door to open, your body starts producing it in larger quantities because it's like, we got to get in there. Let's send more soldiers, and then the body starts storing more and more fat, and that just is something that happens with hormonal shifts. Is that we do become more insulin resistant, and that fat gain happens despite us doing all the things we did before. And there are strategies to combat that, and we can talk about that for sure. But that's kind of one of the main things. The stress hormones are also a big part of it, and sometimes even just what we're exposed to in our environment and inflammation and things like that. But I think that insulin is kind of the central part of what's going on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's terrible. I'm like, wow. So can we start talking about some of those strategies? Because I feel like a lot of people go to, okay, well, I'm storing more fat, so I'm going to eat less and I'm
Right.
going to work out harder. And now, and maybe this is the same person who's dealing with chronic fatigue. So she's going to get in trouble here. Is that something that you see your patients doing? And like, what should we be doing instead?
Yes, I love that. And we, unfortunately, especially the generation of women who's currently in our 40s, 50s, we grew up on eat less, move more.
Mhm.
There's something that happened in the last 30 years where if you look at the obesity maps across the United States, the rate of becoming overweight or obese has just massively increased everywhere to everyone. And
Mm.
there's a number of reasons why that happened. I think because convenience foods became so popular, also because fat was really villainized and we leached all the fat out of foods and made all these low fat products that ended up being so laden with chemicals and having a bunch of sugar in them. So basically, on the population level, everyone gained weight. And then, as the response to this, rather than sort of investigating it more, the medical establishment mostly said, well, why don't you just eat a little less and move more? Which is, I think, a ridiculous response. When you see an epidemic, something happening to everyone, and then you blame the individual for, not eating less or moving more. But we saw the rise of cardio queens, of jogging and biking and doing all that stuff, 5-7 days a week, and eating a bunch of low fat foods, trying to eat less and less. And that really does a number on the metabolism. That can really increase stress hormones, which are also fat storage hormones, and tells your metabolism really not to burn fat, and makes it much harder to be healthy. So I think the way we've reframed that now is, at least when I work with women, the main thing that I want women to hear is that what we need to build you up. We're not trying to be less. We're not trying to eat less, move more. Now we're trying to build a healthy body, which means nourishing you in any way that we can so that your body can process food and turn it into energy. Food is good. Food is energy. Food is fuel. Food is nutrients. And so what does that mean? That means trying to choose whole foods whenever possible. And rather than looking for what's low fat or low calorie, nutrient dense foods. So we know that protein is so important. Protein is a key macronutrient that's going to feed our muscles and increase our metabolism. So one thing that really counteracts insulin resistance is having a lot of healthy muscle. Healthy muscle can sort of soak up blood sugar when it's moving, and the more lean muscle you have, the less insulin resistant you are. So
Hmm.
if you've been following any of the trends, you know that strength training and eating adequate protein are huge, and there's a good reason for that. The other thing that protein does, it just makes you full longer, and it decreases cravings for some of those other foods, and it's not as easy to overeat. There's a lot of processed foods that are just really easy to overeat. You can sit down with a bag of chips and eat the whole thing, but if you're eating an apple, I don't see many people eat 4 apples in a row.
Yeah.
So I think one of the strongest things is choosing whole foods whenever possible. If you need some numbers to go by, then aiming for 100 grams of protein a day and about 25 grams of fiber. That often is simple enough and gets people the nutrients they need and gets the metabolism tuned up in a way that you can stop holding on to fat and start building muscle. And if you pair that with not eating after dark or not eating after 7 p.m. and doing some strength training, maybe taking a walk after your biggest meal, that's also another great tool for combating insulin resistance, is walking after a big meal. Those can all start making a difference. But I think the big thing is that we're not trying to be smaller. I think women, for a long time, were taught to make themselves smaller, restrict, restrict, restrict. Now we're nourishing, we're building up, we're going to have these beautiful, lean, healthy bodies that'll take us through all the decades of our lives.
I love that. I mean, it's like you said, it's adding things to, instead of, like, I remember I'm such the poster child for this time of what you were talking about with the cardio. I wasn't thinking like, what can I add to my diet? I'm like, what can I take out? Like, what fat can I take out? I was not focusing on protein and fiber. Like, we are so much more educated now what to focus on, but it was like, if it's fat free, I didn't think about sugar. Like you said, all those fat free things have more sugar. And it's so funny. I look at my diet back then, like, especially like my college years, and I'm like, ugh. I mean, I ate chips that made you have anal leakage, like
Right.
I was like, if
Yeah.
it, whatever it takes. It's insane. It's crazy.
It's
And then
insane.
it's insane. And literally on the bag, it had a warning label, and I still bought it. I only bought it once because I did have issues, but I'm like, it's so funny to think that was the norm and not strength training. And because we didn't want to get big, get
Right.
bulky, all of
Yeah.
that is so, it's so nice that it's been kind of debunked. I think there's always going to be a bit of that in our generation, like deep down. It's like
Yeah.
you have to consciously fight that messaging, because I think it's so ingrained in our generation, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes, gosh. And you know what? When I was a second year, and I was also just like you, I grew up in this generation. I started dieting when I was probably 22 and did every diet that was out there. And in medical school, when we were learning about this, I remember specifically they said, the most effective thing for weight loss is counting calories and keeping your calories really low. So I went through years of just counting calories and trying to just keep that as low as possible. And I think that also can really mess with the metabolism. And we really ignored how foods send signals within your body. So yes, you will lose weight when you're counting calories, but cravings are extremely powerful things.
Yeah.
And I think that eating in a way that prevents cravings, so again, trying to eat whole foods, and at first it may feel restrictive if you're giving up your Oreos or whatever it is, but the cravings that sets off in your brain, the food scientists that have worked on this have really followed what the cigarette industry did. It creates biochemical pathways in your brain that make it almost impossible to resist. So you're always fighting, you're always fighting that craving. If you're just counting calories and eating whatever you want and just, using that willpower day after day after day, that's really challenging. And I think people who are able to prioritize their protein, get some strength training in there, build, and of course, de-stressing with sweets is so common, but like build some other habits around that. Maybe maybe going for a walk when you used to eat sweets, or drinking a cup of herbal tea, and doing something else that's nice for yourself that soothes your body. And then your brain starts rewiring, and you don't crave those things anymore. I think we underestimate how much certain foods hijack our brains, and it's not our fault. This is People have been working on this for years and years and years. I think that it's the Doritos, I think it's Doritos that says you can't have just one, where it's like, it's true, you can't, and that's not good. That's not a good thing.
Oh, they're so evil. I swear. It's true. I've read books on the food industry, and it's and it's so powerful, like you said. And then if you're just using white knuckling to try to do that, it's like having those other alternatives, I think, are so powerful. Like if after dinner I have a cup of tea, I feel like the healthiest person on the planet. I feel warm inside. I'm like, this is so great. You don't want anything else after that. It scratches an itch, I feel like, or like taking a walk. That's my new thing. I heard on a podcast, if you have a partner, go on a walk after dinner and, take turns like talking about things that you need to talk about, not distracted, and get fresh air and help your digestion. I'm like, we got to start doing that and not be interrupted by your kids every 5 seconds. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about the metabolism. And, you did
Mhm.
talk about a couple, how these things can kind of interfere with a strong metabolism. So what are some things we can do to strengthen it?
Yes, great question, and we've talked about some of those.
Yeah.
So again, insulin is sort of the central player here, and all the things that we want to be insulin sensitive, which means that when insulin comes around and knocks on the door of the cell, we want to respond immediately and swing that door open. So becoming insulin sensitive is some of the things we talked about. Healthy muscle, lean muscle, is highly correlated with insulin sensitivity. And muscle in itself is an organ within the body, and it sends out chemical messengers called myokines that are anti-inflammatory, that are really protective. And we now have studies that show that there was a big study looking at the factors that determined whether someone would survive a cancer diagnosis. And they looked at lifestyle, genetics, all kinds of things. And they found that the amount of healthy, lean muscle someone had was the biggest predictor of whether someone would survive a cancer diagnosis. So again,
Wow.
that muscle is so protective in so many ways. Almost, I think it's better than any medication or supplement that we can take. Just carrying
Wow.
healthy muscle, yeah. So that's a big deal. Also, just like you said, the walk after dinner, muscles, if they're active, can shuttle, they're the only cells that can bring sugar into them without insulin. So if you can sweep up all that blood sugar after a meal by just gently walking, that makes a huge difference in terms of insulin sensitivity. Not eating after dark also is or that's not always possible. Right now it gets dark at like 3 or 4 p.m. Not eating after 7 p.m., letting your system rest and digest at night. We're really kind of, our metabolism is aligned with our circadian rhythm to some extent. So that can be really powerful. And, fasting is a whole nother topic on its own. And, but I think this is sort of like a gentle way of fasting, of just like, if you at least can eat your meals within a 10 to 12 hour period and have that period during the night where you're not producing digestive enzymes or insulin, that can be really helpful. And speaking of the night, sleep is huge and so instrumental in terms of metabolism and insulin resistance. So sleeping in a dark space. There's also a study that found that even a small amount of light in someone's room increased their insulin resistance. And so not sleeping with the TV on, making sure, there's a lot of people who feel like, oh, finally get me time at the end of the day. And you can be doom scrolling but trying to protect your sleep, and maybe switching to a non-screen activity in the last 30 minutes before bed or last hour, where you're reading a book or doing an adult coloring book or taking a bath or, whatever it is, drinking some herbal tea, talking to your partner, finding a non-screen activity, making sure that you're sleeping in a dark room, that you have enough time for sleep, that you're getting rid of distractions. And if sleep is an issue, there are again, there might be a hormonal issue, there might be other issues that there's support around. So those are some of the keys, I think, for metabolism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting about the muscle and how
Yeah.
important it just like that's another thing that we grew up not wanting, which is
Yeah.
crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
like I just ran and did hit cardio classes, and it's crazy. And the after dinner walk, I had an acupuncturist come on my show, and she said in Chinese medicine they say 100 steps after dinner to make it to 100 years. And
Wow.
so I went after dinner one night and I counted 100 steps. I'm like, I didn't even get down my street. So it's really not a lot that you
It's
need.
not.
You don't need to go for an hour walk to see the benefits of that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's really great. Okay, so those are so helpful. When you talk about sleep, I know this can be a big complaint for a lot of women. And I love your tips for, like the non-screen activities. And I feel like that's doable. You're saying 30 minutes to an hour. It's not like you can't do it at all. But, trying to clean up your sleep is just so important. If you're kind of cleaning up your sleep and you're still seeing issues with your clients with sleep, is that a hormonal thing too, like most of the time? And is that something that if we can work on our hormones a little bit, that gets improved?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about that perimenopause period and how we're just starting to understand that there's a long period of hormonal chaos, really. And we lose progesterone before we lose estrogen. And estrogen has sort of always been the shining star of hormone replacement when we talk about hormones mostly. And estrogen is super important. But progesterone for a long time took a back seat. We thought it was only useful for protecting the uterus from cancer. But now we know that progesterone is actually broken down to other neurochemicals that go to the brain and are really instrumental for sleep. So, as women in their 40s often start waking up at night or can't stay asleep or can't fall asleep, and often that progesterone is declining, and sometimes adding some bioidentical progesterone can really improve sleep quality and sleep architecture. So, you're getting restful sleep, and it's inexpensive and it's very safe. So I think that's kind of low hanging fruit for a lot of women. Sometimes it is more stress and burnout, and it's a cortisol issue.
Okay.
Cortisol is our stress hormone, and we have a rhythm that it's supposed to kind of rise when we first wake up and then slowly go down and lower at the end of the day. And for some women, we see this sort of paradoxical rise in cortisol at the end of the day. And that's often related to burnout and to periods of high stress. And there are some supplements that I think can be really good for this that are not sleep medications, but um, there are supplements that reduce the stress response in the evening. So a lot of women feel wired but tired, where they're like, they would love to sleep, but their bodies are like still wired. And that's usually because you have adrenaline or norepinephrine or a lot of cortisol coursing through your body. So there's something called L-theanine that you can get over the counter that just reduces your cortisol and makes it easier to actually fall asleep and retrain your body to lower that cortisol at night. There's another one. It's a long name. It's called phosphatidylserine, but it's another one that lowers your stress hormones. I have a compounded version that I create in my office of just an herbal mix to lower those stress hormones at night so you can actually fall asleep without inducing sleep. And I think melatonin can be useful too. Melatonin is um, highly anti-inflammatory, and it won't keep you asleep, but sometimes it can help fall asleep if that's a big issue.
I love the ideas for the supplements too. I've always had an easy time falling asleep, but sometimes I wake up and
Mm-hmm.
then I can't go back to sleep. And that's like torture when you can't sleep and you're in the
Yes.
middle of the night and you're like so tired, but your brain's not tired.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's torture.
Yeah. So those are some things that can help like keep you asleep. And then
Yeah.
also like cleaning up your environment. It's so interesting. I'm like, I sleep in a very dark room, but then I notice there are like these little lights. Like it is not completely dark. And so they say even you said even a little bit of light can affect your insulin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to really look into. And I had a episode where I did on a sleep routine and I was doing it for like a month. I was really good about it and I slept amazing. And there was nothing I added. I didn't take any sleep aids or anything like that. And I was like, wow, that's a real thing. Like, don't knock this. I think a lot of people will hear this kind of stuff and be like, but it really works.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, and I think, we're conditioned to work on our exercise and diet and we're constantly trying to improve, but like I think it's not as popular to work on your sleep, It's like if it
Yeah.
happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I do think that it's also a work in progress of finding the routine that works for you and having it be, a goal and aspiration. The other really important repair hormone is growth hormone. And growth hormone repairs everything in your body, improves the way your metabolism runs, burns fat, and builds muscle. And we can only produce growth hormone between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Mm.
And you have to be asleep to get it. So that's
Wow.
the other key factor. If you miss those key hours of sleep, you won't get the repair that you need.
I feel like that's a motivation for us to get to bed by 10. And that's like our skin and like all the things that make us look fresh and glowy. All of that stuff is working when you're asleep, and especially if you're sleeping during those hours too. So I feel like I could just keep you here all day and talk to you. But I can't do that. I have to respect your time. So tell us, if you could, more about how to follow you, where to find you if somebody is interested in learning more from you.
Yeah. So we are on Instagram at the Gajer Practice. And we have a website called thegajerpractice.com. I see patients in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland. And we can do telemedicine visits with anyone across the country, more in a health coaching capacity. Make recommendations for supplements, lifestyle, dietary. We can review your labs you've done with another doctor, suggest where to go next or what to try. There's on our website, there's a button to book a free introductory call. And I welcome people to do that. It's an easy way to find out if in your particular case, if it would be worth your while to work with us.
Amazing. And then if somebody wanted to buy some of the supplements that you were talking about, could they do that on your website too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's a
Okay,
there's
good.
a shop button there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll link your website in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
And then thank
you.
you so much. This was so interesting and so informative. I appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.